During an interview with NBC's Today Show, Robert Bates alternated between choked up and defiant, insisting that anyone could have made this mistake. Here's how he describes what happened in that shooting.
My taser is right here on the front, tucked in a protective vest. My gun itself is on my side, normally to the rear.
And people are going to look at that, Mr. Bates, they're going to say, how could you make this mistake? How could you think you were going for your taser on your chest, tucked into that vest, and accidentally pull your weapon?
Well, let me say this has happened a number of times around the country. I have read about it in the past. I thought to myself after reading several cases, I don't understand how this can happen. You must believe me, it can happen to anyone.
All right, so let's talk more about this. Cheryl Dorsey is a retired LAPD sergeant. She served on the force for 20 years. Back with us, and good to see you. And HLN legal analyst Joey Jackson is in New York City Force. Good to see you as well. Okay, so Cheryl, let me begin with you because you hear Bates say it could happen to anyone. It's happened a number of times across the nation. But in his case, he's talking about the taser being at his chest, his pistol being at his side. Is that a plausible explanation that really it could happen to anyone? Those are two very different motions, reaching for the pistol or the taser on his chest.
Good morning, Fred. Thank you for having me. And Mr. Bates should probably stop talking. It can happen to anyone who's not properly trained. It can happen to anyone who has no business being part of an undercover sting operation. It could happen to anyone who's not familiar with their handgun.
So Joey, as if you were representing Officer Bates, would you have been a bit nervous about his explanation, or do you think he does weave a believable experience?
Well, you know what, Frederica, and good afternoon to you, and good afternoon, Ms. Dorsey. Look, the reality is this. It's that it's not about being believable. It's about acting in a reasonable and responsible way. And so is he believable? Perhaps is he likable? Perhaps is he a good person? I'm not here to pass judgment on that. What I'm here to do is evaluate his actions and see if they're consistent, Frederica, or inconsistent with the law. And what the law says is if you engage in negligence, that is, you are careless, and that carelessness rises to such a degree as a reasonable, prudent person under similar circumstance would not do as you did, then it makes it culpable and makes him responsible under the manslaughter statute. And manslaughter is just that, Frederica. It's did you act in a negligent way, and is that negligence something that a regular and standard person who was acting as you would have acted in a contrary way? And so when you look at it, it's very troubling from a defense perspective.
Okay, so then Sharon, you talk about the training. If you had the training, then this kind of mistake not likely would happen. And so when you hear Joey use the words negligent and being irresponsible and careless, well, does that kind of parallel not having the proper training to be able to be an officer using a taser and a pistol?
Well, absolutely. And we understand from Mr. Bates' own written statement that he called the sting operation command the night before the incident because he wanted to know what was going on and if his services were needed. And so he talks about being in that roll call training where they talk about Mr. Harris and they describe him as a bad SOB. So he was amped up and excited to be a part of this. And certainly Mr. Bates, if no one else knows, understands the level of his qualifications. He has admitted that the last time he shot at the range was in the fall of 2014. So with his understanding of his level of expertise, the frequency with which he fires, practices, and draws his weapon, he knew alone and him alone that he should not have involved himself in that tactical operation. He should not have been drawing a taser, a handgun, or anything else at that point.
So does this, I guess, underscore an even bigger problem, to both of you, whether it be about the whole, lack of training or perhaps more training necessary, the reserve, deputy position, the idea that an officer can elect to be a part of an operation, a planned operation, and even, there are just so many questions, and even the fact that Mr. Bates was kind of the last on the scene. This suspect was already detained, already down. Was there even a use to employ a taser? Cheryl, you first.
Well, I don't think so. And again, according to his written statement, what he says is that as he's running up to the scene of the struggle that's going on, he's witnessing for several seconds the officer's attempt to gain control of Mr. Harris. And then he says he sees a way in. I mean, he sees a way in. Here's his opportunity to get in there and shoot, tase, whatever it is that he wanted to do with this way in. And so it was not required. No one asked him. No one offered, required his participation. They put him at the end of that situation for a reason, because he had no business being there in the first place. But understand, the sheriff wanted him there because that's his friend, and he's allowed him to come out and play.
So then, Joey, from a legal standpoint, there, are we talking about, this eagerness and overzealousness? Does this fall into the category of what you mentioned of carelessness or negligence?
Frederica, it could, and it seems as though it likely would. And let me just explain why. The reality is that we need reserve officers, we certainly need police officers, and we need police forces to be supplemented. But we need to make sure that the people who are out there are certainly competent and certainly qualified. I don't care how old you are. I don't care who your friends are. I don't care how much you donate. That's great. To each their own.
Except
are
all
you
of those things
capable?
will be evaluated in this.
Absolutely, Frederica. It'll be picked apart, how much money he gave. People need to give money. They should give more money. There's a lot of worthy causes. People have great friends. A lot of friends have more of them.
But
that's
does it
not
give
the
you
focus.
a ticket in to certain
The
access?
focus, exactly. The focus from a legal perspective is, are you qualified to be there? Do you have the requisite training and experience? And presuming you do, did you act responsibly under these circumstances? And that's what it needs to be measured by. And if you're mistaking your taser, which is a different color and in a different location on your body, from your gun, then that becomes problematic and not only subjects you, of course, to criminal responsibility, which is steep, and of course he's facing 4 years on the manslaughter 2 charge, but it faces not only him, but the entire police department to civil liability in terms of money. And finally, Frederica, the reality is it benefits everyone when people are trained and responsible. The people you're around and you're protecting in the community are safer, you're safer, the suspect you're going after is safer because you know what you're doing. And so in the event we have a reserve force that knows what they're doing, let's have more of them. But if there's issues with their training, it has to be reevaluated and examined so that the right people are out there and the right people are on the job.
All right, Joey Jackson, Cheryl Dorsey, thanks so much to both of you. Appreciate it.
Have a great day, Frederica.
Thank
You as well. All right, still